Hi BookTube, and welcome to a new video. This is going to be a review video of this book, Jarett Kobek, The Future Won't Be Long. Now, I did post a video earlier in this year asking BookTube viewers whether I should read this book or not, because I'd read just before Christmas my first Jarett Kobek book called Atta. And there's a link to that review, which was about the ringleader of the 9/11 bombers. And it was a brilliant book. It was really a sort of all about a character study. It wasn't so much a novel in sort of plot terms, although you knew where it was going to end up, with the guy flying the planes into the Twin Towers. It was a great book. It crept into my top 5 of the year, and I thought, I want to read more of this guy. And just so happened, the first book of the year I read was called This Is Not the Internet. I Hate the Internet. Cover appears there. Which, as I say, the first book I read, and I knew it was going to get my top 10 reads of this year, and it still will, because it was a fantastic read. Really very, very good social satire. Again, not really a novel, although there were sort of characters. They were completely uninteresting to me. It was about the social satire of the internet age and Twitter storms and, the money behind it. And it was also about the gentrification of San Francisco as all the tech people and the tech campuses moved in and totally changed the nature of that city. And I was very hungry for another fix of Jarett Kobek. And I knew that this book had come out in hardback recently to that, but the dilemma I posed was that it's about the New York club scene of the 80s and 90s, which is something I'm profoundly disinterested in. And that posed me the dilemma of, did I want to read this book or not? So the fact that it was in hardback, and I really didn't want to justify paying for a hardback, sort of helped me help my decision. But also, in the interim, I'd read a short work of his called "If You Won't Read, Why Should I Bother to Write?", in which he transcripted excerpts from celebrities' private videos, which tended to be either sex videos or drug videos. And it's a brilliant little book. I reviewed it in my March roundup, and again, I'll post a link to that. But it was a taster. It was about 60 pages long. It was very, very good. Definitely not a novel. But recently, obviously, this has now come out in paperback, so I kind of felt that the barriers to me reading it had lessened. Also, I know he's got a new book coming out next year about Trump and Me Too and all those sorts of things, which I'm really looking forward to. And I just thought, for the sake of completion, because I do like this guy, well, I'm going to have to read this. So I had about 8 hours of rail travel over a sort of 36-hour period this week. So this is all I took. And I read about 300 pages of it across those 2 sort of journeys. And it's taken me a long time to read the last 100 pages because I found this a slog. I did not enjoy this at all. It is well written in his inimitable style. But again, he's not really a novel writer, and the problem is that this is an attempt at a novel, and I think it fails. It uses 2 of the main characters from I Hate the Internet and some of the other subsidiary characters. And it goes along some reasonably well-worn themes, such as, this is about the gentrification of New York in the 80s and 90s. And it's about the 80s and 90s club scene, as I say. And also it refers to an infamous murder within that club scene, which I knew all the details of because I watch a lot of sort of true crime documentaries. So I wasn't even sort of intrigued by that because I knew the story, I knew the case. Actually, it's not that much about gentrification and the club scene. They are in the book for sure, but they're sort of background to the lives of the characters. And I wasn't interested in these characters in the book that I really enjoyed, I Hate the Internet, and to have a whole book based around them now, it just didn't work for me. So before I get into the reasons why that is, I'm just going to give you an idea of his style, because it is well written. And if you're interested in those things, and if you like sort of character-driven, even if it's rather feckless characters, character-driven narrative, you might like this. So I thought I'd give you a couple of bits of his style. Okay. Tomorrow will be nuts, he said. I have to go to Shea Stadium. Whatever for? They're marrying Spider-Man before the game. Stan Lee is officiating. All of us interns have to make sure the costumed characters don't die from heat exposure. I'm the Incredible Hulk's handler. And also... we exchanged pleasantries and hung up. Life wasn't anything but complications. The last time I'd seen John, I'd beaten him with a hardcover debut of A Polymorphous Pervert while a Bengali waiter cursed us. Now that scene is described in great detail when it happens in the book, and really that pithy summary of 2-3 sentences is much more entertaining than the original thing. Because what it is, these two characters, Baby, who is a gay guy, young lad from the Midwest, arrives in New York, and Adeline, who's a rather sort of indulged Californian 19-year-old who flees California to escape her mother and is attending Parsons University in New York. And they meet up on the first night of Baby's arrival in New York, and they become bosom buddies. And the story is 10 years of them in New York doing New York things, how it changes them, how New York changes around them. And it's just not very interesting. I mean, they're not very interesting people. For some reason, Adeline speaks as if she is hanging around with Samuel Boswell and Dr. Johnson in the 17th century. Her language is very heightened and rather sort of snooty. She's sort of looking down on everyone, although she acknowledges her own failings. And, you know, this book is just it's not a diary, but it's as if it is a diary or a chronicle of, you know, they just go from one thing to another. You know, they are consuming New York culture. They are busying themselves in a very bored, desultory way with all that New York has to offer. But you know, it's sort of escapism, but it's not satisfying escapism. You know, so the whole club thing is very, very druggy. There's lots of drinking. They go and see lots of movies. But as I say, the weird thing is there's not that much about the club scene. There's more talk about the films they see. So in this we get discussions of films such as Schindler's List next to Evil Dead 3. We get Freaks and Train Spotting. And actually the analysis of Train Spotting by Kobek in the guise of the character is very good. It's very funny. There's, you know, Baby eventually becomes a novelist, somewhat improbably, and joins the sort of New York literati, albeit he's a genre writer. So there's lots of discussions of his, you know, plots that he comes up with, which are just not interesting to read. You know, if they were interesting and real, you might want to read the book. But sort of plot summaries are just not interesting to read, of books that don't even exist, are not interesting to read. So, you know, as they sort of mooch around from, you know, one cultural thing to another without really investing themselves in it, you know, they want to be bombed out, and they, you know, it's almost like killing time, filling time. So New York is supposed to be this 24-hour city, and yes, you can expend time doing stuff for 24 hours, but none of it is uplifting. I don't know really. I mean, they do have a strong relationship. You know, it can never be sexual because of their, you know, different sexual orientations. And I suppose there's some sort of warmth to be felt, but they're such, you know, they're such screw-ups really that you know mitigates against the warmth. I just couldn't get into this book at all. You know, it's lots of short chapters, which is fine, and basically a chapter equates to an event, and then sort of somewhere in the first sort of third towards half, there's this one really long chapter where lots of stuff is discussed, you know, then this event, then that event. He literally uses the word then, you know, then this happened, then that happened, which is a very odd device. It's as if he's also just trawling out a list of stuff that they did. You know, here's the poster from the film, or here's the review of the book. It's almost like a sort of collector's mentality, but they're too uninvested in the whole thing to be collectors. And there's not much more to say really about this. You know, stories about sort of, you know, drug excess or, you know, party excess when you're out of your head or drinking excess I find tedious. It's like you had to have been there. And Kobek takes us there. But it's as if you're sat in a pub with someone regaling you with this story about something, you know, frightfully interesting or funny or ridiculous that happened to them. Personally, I find that very boring. And this book manages to replicate that. And there's not much else to say, really. I didn't enjoy this book at all. As I say, I don't think he's best at writing novels. I think he's best at being a social satirist and finding the correct framework in each of his works to go off on at whatever, is the subject of his scorn. So in I Hate the Internet, it was obviously all things social media and how we live our lives on that. And San Francisco Gentrification, which was much more interesting and somehow gave you much more of a flavour than the Gentrification of New York here, which is very skimpily done, and in What If You Won't Read, Why Should I Write? It was about sort of celebrity, selfie culture, making videos, and those videos going online, going into the public sphere, sex tapes and things like that. So, and that was in the form of literally transcripts of these sex tapes. So he found the form to reproduce these, but it's not a novel. And although technically people will say I Hate the Internet is a novel, to me it isn't, or at least the interesting stuff isn't. This is a novel and fails, I think. Fails because it's not interesting. The character, I wasn't interested, as I say, in the characters in the first novel. I certainly don't want a whole novel devoted to them here. And I was trapped. The point is I hadn't got any other books with me. So I was trapped on my rail travel, having to plough through this because I'm not a bailer. I haven't overcome that sort of mental block of being able just to quit a book. Although, being stuck on a train with nothing to read would have killed me. But even if, I could have bailed when I got home and just not read the last 100 pages, but I battled on through. But it took me so long. It took me 3 days to read 100 pages just because I just wasn't into it. So I give this 2.5 stars. I mean, it's sort of 2.5, 3, because it is well written. You might be interested in it. It is good on sort of culture. But, why do we need books where an author, Jarett Kobek, has one of his characters discussing the merits of David Foster Wallace's The Infinite Jest? You can read literary criticism. You can see other booktubers talk about it. You don't need to devote pages in here to it. And the stuff about the New York publishing scene, although it had the best character in the book, which was Baby's agent, who was foul-mouthed, obscene, everything his analysis of how things work, how the world of publishing works, was funny, was amusing, because his language was so over the top and denigrating everybody and very, sexual. But him aside, the rest of the stuff about the publishing industry is not interesting, I felt. I mean, again, maybe you might feel it is. So there you have it. I kind of wish I'd stuck to my resolve when I put that video out there asking, should I read this? But ironically, it wasn't the subject matter that ended up not fulfilling me. It was the book itself. It was the novel, the fictional element itself. Yeah, very disappointing. But I'm incredibly looking forward to his next one, because I suspect, that won't be these old characters he's done before. That will be, hopefully he will find that, quite a suitable framework with which to, have a blistering attack on Trump and everything that he spawned in Me Too and the, other reactions against him. So I'm looking forward to that. Comes out 2019, and I will probably invest in the hardback of that, because I want to get to it as soon as possible. Okay, thanks very much. Till next time.